I smoothed down my red dress, catching my reflection in the hallway mirror. The fabric hugged my curves perfectly, a last-minute splurge from that boutique we discovered in Santorini. My skin still held onto that Mediterranean glow from our vacation, making the dress pop even more. 2 weeks in Greece had been exactly what Corin and I needed. Between the sunsets in Oea, getting lost in tiny village streets, and that incredible night under the stars on our private balcony, I hadn't seen him this relaxed in ages. The way he'd held my hand as we wandered through ancient ruins, spouting random historical facts he'd clearly researched beforehand, that was the Corin I'd fallen for. I spotted him in the mirror, leaning against the doorframe behind me. His blue dress shirt brought out his eyes, and that subtle smile on his face took me right back to our last morning on the beach. "You look stunning," he said, crossing the room to wrap his arms around my waist. His cologne mixed with the salty breeze coming through our apartment window. The engagement party invite from Lysandra sat on the entry table, her precise handwriting spelling out the details for tonight's celebration. My best friend was finally getting her fairy tale moment, and my heart felt ready to burst with happiness for her. I turned in Corin's arms, straightening his collar. That tan suited him, softening the usual paleness from too many hours coding indoors. His fingers traced lazy patterns on my back, and I caught that look in his eyes, the same one he'd given me when we danced under the Greek moonlight. "We should get going," I said, though I was tempted to stay right there in our little bubble. "Lysandra will kill me if we're late to her party." A quick check of my clutch, phone, lipstick, the small gift card we'd picked out. The nervous energy of anticipation buzzed through me as I grabbed my keys. Tonight was going to be perfect. I could feel it in my bones. I spot Lysandra across the crowded room, radiant in her emerald green dress. Her eyes light up when she sees me, and we embrace in a flurry of excited squeals and congratulations. Corin squeezes my hand before drifting off to the bar, leaving me to catch up with the bride-to-be. The champagne flows freely, and I'm deep in conversation about wedding plans when a familiar laugh cuts through the party's buzz. My heart skips. I'd know that sound anywhere. I turn, and there he is. Ethan. He's standing by the window, camera hanging from his neck, looking exactly like he did in college, just with a bit more scruff and sun-weathered charm. Our eyes meet across the room, and his smile spreads slow and easy. "Well, look who it is," he says, making his way over. Ilara, still turning heads in red dresses. The champagne buzzes pleasantly in my veins as I take in his presence. He smells like sandalwood and fresh air, and his shirt is wrinkled in that carefully careless way that always suited him. "Still sneaking your camera into fancy parties, I see," I tease, tapping the lens. "Hey, someone's got to document all this beauty." His eyes linger on me a beat too long. "Been too long, Elle. What's new in your world?" We fall into conversation like no time has passed. He tells me about his recent assignment in Bali, the way the sunrise painted the rice terraces gold. I find myself leaning closer, drawn in by his animated gestures and the familiar way he touches my arm when he laughs. "Remember that sunset in Santorini?" he asks, voice dropping lower. "When we snuck onto that rooftop?" Heat creeps up my neck. "You mean when you almost got us arrested?" "Worth it though, wasn't it?" His fingers brush mine as he takes my empty glass. "Want another?" I know I should step back, create some distance, but the warmth of the champagne and the pull of nostalgia keep me rooted. I nod, watching him weave through the crowd, the memory of Santorini sunsets dancing in my mind. The champagne buzz softened the edges of my awareness as Ethan and I fell deeper into our shared memories. Each story led to another, and soon we were finishing each other's sentences, just like in college. His eyes sparkled with that familiar mischief when he mentioned our impromptu road trip to the coast during finals week. "I remember that tiny seafood shack?" I asked, the memory vivid despite the years. "The one with the grumpy owner who ended up singing karaoke with us." Ethan's laugh sent a warm current through me. My glass was empty again. I couldn't remember how many I'd had, but the room felt warmer, more intimate. The party swirled around us in a distant haze while Ethan and I existed in our own bubble of nostalgia. "God, we were something else back then," he said, his voice dropping lower. His fingers brushed against mine as he took my empty glass, setting it aside. "I want to get some air. I saw a nice garden outside." I glanced around the room. Corin was deep in conversation with a group by the bar, and Lysandra was surrounded by well-wishers. The rational part of my brain warned me about going outside alone with Ethan, but the champagne and memories had already clouded my judgment. Sure, just for a minute, I heard myself say. We slipped through the French doors onto a stone terrace. The evening air carried the scent of jasmine, and fairy lights twinkled in the surrounding trees. Ethan led the way down the garden path, his hand hovering near the small of my back. Each step took us further from the party's warmth and deeper into the quiet darkness of the garden. My heels clicked against the stone path as we walked, the sound somehow amplifying the intimacy of the moment. The music from inside became muffled, replaced by the gentle rustle of leaves and our own quiet breathing. I felt hyper-aware of Ethan's presence beside me, of how close we were walking, of every accidental brush of our arms. The night air carried the scent of jasmine as Ethan and I wandered deeper into the garden. The champagne buzzed pleasantly through my system, making everything feel dreamy and nostalgic. Fairy lights twinkled overhead, casting a soft glow across the flowering bushes. I found myself telling Ethan about my recent trip to Greece with Corin, but my words trailed off as his hand brushed against mine. My skin tingled at the contact. The way he looked at me in that moment transported me back to those carefree college days. Ethan stepped closer, his familiar cologne mixing with the garden's floral scent. I knew I should step back, create some distance, but my feet stayed rooted to the spot. His hand came up to brush a strand of hair from my face. "I've missed you," he whispered. Before I could process what was happening, his lips were on mine. The kiss was exactly as I remembered, passionate, reckless, intoxicating. For a moment I melted into it, letting the flood of memories wash over me. His hands tangled in my hair as the kiss deepened. Reality crashed back like a bucket of cold water. I pushed against his chest, breaking away from the kiss. "We can't." I stumbled backward, my heel catching on an uneven paver. I lost my balance, my knees buckling beneath me. I landed awkwardly, right in front of Ethan, my face level with his waist. The sound of footsteps made me freeze. I turned my head to see Corin standing at the garden entrance, his face illuminated by the fairy lights. The color drained from his features as he took in the scene before him, me on my knees, lipstick smeared, Ethan standing over me with his shirt rumpled. My stomach dropped. From Corin's perspective, this looked like something entirely different from my clumsy attempt to put distance between Ethan and myself. I see Corin's face contort with pain and disbelief. I scramble to my feet, my dress now stained with grass, but I barely notice. The garden spins slightly from the champagne, making it harder to find the right words. "Corin, wait. This isn't what it looks like." The words tumble out of my mouth, sounding pathetically cliché even to my own ears. Ethan takes a step back, raising his hands in surrender, but Corin's eyes are fixed solely on me. "Really?" Because what it looks like is my girlfriend sneaking off to a dark garden with another man. His voice comes out low and controlled, but I know that tone. It's the same one he uses when he's trying desperately to hold himself together. I step toward him, but he backs away. He kissed me, I pushed him away. "You arrived at exactly the wrong moment." My voice cracks. The fairy lights strung through the garden trees cast strange shadows across Corin's face, making him look like a stranger. "The wrong moment," he laughs, but it's hollow. "The wrong moment would have been 5 minutes later, right? How convenient that I showed up when I did." "That's not fair." Heat rises to my cheeks. "You know me better than that. I would never." "Do I?" Corin cuts me off. "Because the Ilara I thought I knew wouldn't be alone in a garden with her ex, drinking champagne and sharing old memories." He spits out the last words like they're poison. "I made a mistake coming out here, but nothing happened." I reach for his arm, but he jerks away as if my touch burns. The rejection stings worse than the false accusation. "I saw you, Ilara. Both of you. Looking pretty cozy for nothing." The hurt in his eyes morphs into something harder, colder. "You know what? I don't even want to hear it. I can't look at you right now." The drive home feels endless. Corin's knuckles are white against the steering wheel. His jaw clenched so tight I can see the muscle twitching. The radio plays some upbeat song that feels like mockery against the suffocating silence between us. I wrap my arms around myself, the chill of the AC making my skin prickle beneath my red dress, the same dress I'd felt so confident in just hours ago. "Corin, please, you have to let me explain." My voice comes out shaky, barely above a whisper. He doesn't even glance my way. The streetlights pass over his face in rhythmic intervals, highlighting the hard set of his features. The warmth I'd seen in his eyes earlier, when he'd held me in front of our hallway mirror, has completely vanished. I pushed him away. You saw me on the ground because I lost my balance when. Don't. His voice cuts through the air like ice. Just don't. I sink back into my seat, tears threatening to spill. The distance between us feels vast, despite being inches apart. My hand reaches for his arm, but he flinches away from my touch. The gesture hits me like a physical blow. Through the windshield, I watch the familiar streets of our neighborhood pass by. Each turn brings us closer to home, but it feels like we're driving further apart. The warm glow of the Greek sun that had tanned our skin just days ago seems like a distant memory now, replaced by this Arctic wall between us. I try one more time. After everything we've been through, how can you think I would? How can I think? His laugh is hollow, devoid of any humor. I saw you, Ilara, in the garden. With him, what exactly am I supposed to think? The tears finally fall, leaving hot trails down my cheeks. The rest of the ride passes in that terrible silence, broken only by the soft hum of the engine and my occasional sniffling. I've never felt Corin this far away from me, not even when we were actually oceans apart during business trips. This distance, this cold emotional chasm, feels insurmountable. The morning light filters through our bedroom window, but the warmth doesn't reach the cold atmosphere inside. I barely slept, tossing and turning on the couch all night while replaying yesterday's events in my head. The house feels different now, emptier, heavier. I head to the kitchen, my bare feet silent against the hardwood floors. The coffee maker hums to life, its familiar sound somehow foreign in this newfound silence. Through the kitchen doorway, I spot Corin at the dining table, already dressed for work, his laptop open but screen dark. He doesn't look up when I enter. The coffee pot gurgles its last drops. I pour 2 cups out of habit, adding cream to mine, and leaving his black, just how he likes it. My hand shakes slightly as I place his cup next to his laptop. He doesn't acknowledge it. I made eggs if you want some, I offer, my voice sounding strange in the quiet. His shoulders tense, not hungry. The clock on the wall ticks loudly, marking each excruciating second. Dishes from our dinner 2 nights ago still sit in the rack, from when things were normal, when we were laughing about something silly that happened in Greece. Now those memories feel like they belong to different people. I sit across from him, wrapping my hands around my warm mug. Can we please talk about what happened? His fingers stop typing. He finally looks at me, but his eyes are distant, like he's looking through me rather than at me. I have a meeting in 20 minutes. The dismissal stings worse than if he'd shouted at me. This calculated coldness is so unlike him, yet so precisely him, the way he processes hurt by completely shutting down. He closes his laptop with a snap that makes me jump. Standing up, he leaves his untouched coffee on the table. The sound of his footsteps upstairs, the opening and closing of drawers, all feel amplified in this oppressive quiet. When he comes back down, briefcase in hand, he pauses at the front door without turning around. I'll be late tonight. The door closes behind him with a soft click that somehow sounds final. I remain at the table, staring at his full coffee cup growing cold, the silence pressing in from all sides. The apartment feels like it's closing in on me with each passing day. Every morning I wake up hoping today will be different, but Corin's side of the bed remains untouched, cold. I've lost count of how many times I've picked up my phone, typed out messages, deleted them, then typed new ones. This morning I sent him a photo of us from Greece, my head resting on his shoulder as we watched the sunset in Santorini. Remember this moment? I typed beneath it. The message showed as delivered, but no response came. During lunch break, I slipped a note into his laptop bag before he got home. I miss your morning coffee reviews. No one else appreciates my over-roasted beans like you do. I drew a little heart next to it, then felt childish about it, but left it anyway. The silence is deafening. At dinner, I hear him come home, his footsteps in the hallway. I've made his favorite pasta, but he walks straight to his home office. The door clicks shut. The pasta grows cold. Yesterday, I left printed photos on his desk, snapshots from our first date at that quirky arcade, our hiking trip where we got hopelessly lost, but couldn't stop laughing, the day we moved in together. Each one carefully chosen, each one a reminder of what we built. When I checked later, the photos were face down. Today, I texted him about the little things. The weird noise the dishwasher's making. How his favorite coffee shop has a new blend he'd love. The funny thing our neighbor's kid said. My phone stays silent, yet I see him read each message. I've started leaving post-it notes on his mirror, small words, honest words. I miss you. Please talk to me. It wasn't what you think. Each one feels like I'm throwing words into a void, but I keep writing them anyway. Sometimes I find them crumpled in the trash, sometimes they stay untouched, like my presence in his life has become something to look through rather than at. It's like trying to catch smoke with my bare hands. The harder I try to hold on to what we had, the more it seems to slip away. Every attempt at connection feels like shouting into a storm, hoping that somehow my voice will reach him through the thunder of his doubts. I sat by the window of the cafe, staring out at the street as the minutes ticked by. My cappuccino had gone cold by the time Corin showed up. My stomach twisted the moment he walked in. He looked different. Dark circles under his eyes, hair unkempt, like he hadn't slept in days. Neither had I. But seeing him there, tangible and real, instead of just a distant presence behind a slammed door or in some unread text, it felt heavier. Corin didn't sit at first, just hovered awkwardly beside the chair before dropping down across from me. His eyes flicked to the coffee cup in front of him, barely acknowledging that I'd ordered it. White knuckles gripped his knees under the table. I tried to say something, anything, but my throat refused to cooperate. The words got stuck where the guilt's been nestled all these weeks. So I waited for him, because what else was I supposed to do? I can't keep doing this, Ilara. It landed like a punch, even though I had sensed it coming. It's like standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing you're about to fall, but hoping, deep down, you're wrong until gravity slams you with reality. I opened my mouth, ready to ask, beg, more like what he meant, but he kept going, his voice tight and low, like a balloon barely holding together too much air. That night every time I close my eyes I see you and him in that garden. My heart shriveled hearing the words out loud. We've never dragged it into the open like this before. Not since the party. We'd just danced around the truth, letting the cold settle in between us, but now it was laid out, all jagged and painful. I wanted to tell him again how I pushed Ethan away, how it wasn't what it looked like. But it didn't matter, not anymore. He had already made up his mind. I can't forgive you. It just won't go away. My fingers fidgeted with the sleeve of my jumper, twisting the loose yarn until it tugged tight against my wrist. I stared at it, hoping if I stared long enough, his words wouldn't sink in, that I wouldn't have to face them. But they did, seeping into me, breaking me apart with each breath I took. I tried, he said, his voice so small, I almost didn't hear. He pinched the bridge of his nose, maybe to stop from tearing up. I tried to move past it, but seeing you every day just makes it worse. I wanted to say something that would make it all stop. Find some magic phrase that would rewind time, but nothing came, nothing would. Corin paused, glancing out the window like he was searching for something, or maybe just trying to figure out how to make it less horrendous. It felt like being sentenced, watching him pull away from me inch by inch. I think it's best if we end this. Every word was like a nail driven into the coffin of whatever we had left. I had no idea what to do with my hands anymore, so I clenched them in my lap until my knuckles mimicked his, white drained. Corin, my voice broke halfway through. There was no point in finishing whatever sentence I hadn't even begun to form. No argument was going to change his mind. And God, how did we get here? Just a few weeks ago we would have been laughing, planning our future. Vacation memories from Greece weren't even fully unpacked yet, the warmth from those days still hanging in fragments around the house. I could almost feel the sun on my shoulders, the sound of the waves lapping in my ears. Then a blink later, and everything's ash. Corin eased back in the chair, almost bracing for whatever response I could scrape together, but nothing felt adequate. This wasn't something I could glue back together. The pieces of us were too shattered. I'm sorry, I whispered, though I couldn't figure out if it was for him or me. At that moment it didn't matter. After the breakup, I threw myself into my work, but the emptiness followed me everywhere. My colleague Sarah noticed my spiral and gently suggested her therapist. At first I brushed it off, but after another sleepless night staring at old photos of Corin and me, I made the call. Dr. Martinez's office became my weekly sanctuary. In those sessions, I unraveled the threads of what happened that night and my patterns in relationships. She helped me see how I'd often sought validation outside my relationships when feeling disconnected. The champagne, the nostalgia with Ethan, they were just symptoms of something deeper. What were you really looking for that night? She'd ask, making me confront uncomfortable truths about my need for attention and excitement. My marketing projects became my lifeline. I channeled my energy into creating campaigns that actually meant something. Each small success helped rebuild my confidence piece by piece. 6 months into therapy, I bumped into Maya, a mutual friend, at our local coffee shop. She mentioned seeing Corin at a tech conference. My heart clenched when she said he'd joined a rock climbing group and seemed to be doing well. I gripped my coffee cup tighter, forcing a smile. Weeks later, Marcus, another friend, casually mentioned Corin had moved to a new apartment closer to downtown. He'd gotten rid of our old furniture, started fresh. Each update felt like a paper cut, small but sharp. But Dr. Martinez helped me see these weren't punishments. They were signs of Corin healing in his own way. During one session, I broke down about seeing Corin's LinkedIn update about a promotion. Dr. Martinez helped me understand that my pain wasn't just about losing him, but about the trust I'd broken, both his and my own. Growth often comes from our deepest regrets, she said, but only if we're willing to learn from them. I started journaling, documenting my therapy insights and the hard lessons about boundaries and self-respect. Each entry helped me understand myself better, even as I heard through the grapevine about Corin's own journey forward. My phone buzzed during a work meeting. I ignored it at first, focused on presenting our latest campaign metrics. But when I glanced down during a coffee break, my heart stopped. A message from Corin, after all these months. I hope you're doing well, Ilara. I wanted you to know I'm moving to Seattle for a new position. Simple words that felt like daggers. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, a dozen responses flooding my mind. I wanted to congratulate him, to ask about the job, to tell him how therapy had helped me understand my mistakes. Instead, I put the phone away. Dr. Martinez's words echoed in my mind. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is let go. I threw myself into a website redesign project, channeling my emotions into creative direction. Sarah noticed my red eyes but didn't pry. After work, I walked to the community garden I'd joined last month. Tending to my little plot of herbs and flowers had become my sanctuary. The soil under my fingernails grounded me more than any amount of retail therapy ever did. I started taking pottery classes at a local studio. The wheel demanded complete focus. Any wandering thoughts resulted in collapsed clay and messy hands. My first few bowls were disasters, but I kept going back. Each week, I met new people who shared their stories over clay-stained aprons and terrible coffee from the studio's ancient machine. My therapist suggested joining a book club. I found one that met at a cozy wine bar downtown. We discussed everything from Victorian classics to modern thrillers, and I discovered I had opinions I never knew existed. The weekly discussions helped fill the void of intellectual connection I'd been missing. One Saturday morning, while organizing my closet, I found an old photo of Corin and me in Greece. The ache was still there, but different now, more like an old injury that occasionally twinges rather than an open wound. I placed the photo in a box with other memories, not hidden away but not on display either. During a therapy session, Dr. Martinez asked what I'd learned about myself these past months. I told her about finding joy in small victories, mastering a difficult yoga pose, nailing a client presentation, finally throwing a perfectly centered bowl on the wheel. About learning to sit with uncomfortable emotions instead of seeking external validation. About understanding that trust, once broken, isn't just about convincing someone else of your worth, it's about rebuilding faith in yourself. Looking back, that night at the engagement party feels like watching a movie of someone else's life. The woman who let herself get carried away by champagne and nostalgia seems like a stranger now. Not because I've become perfect, far from it, but because I finally understand what drove her actions. I moved to a new apartment across town. Smaller, but with huge windows and a balcony where I could grow my herbs. Each morning I wake up to sunlight streaming through gauzy curtains I chose myself. The walls are covered in local art I discovered at weekend markets, and my wobbly handmade bowls hold fruit on the kitchen counter. It's not the life I planned, but it's becoming one I'm proud of.
Hey everyone, if you enjoyed the story, remember to like, subscribe and comment on the video for more stories like this. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss an update. If you have any similar stories to share, leave them in the comments and we'll make sure to bring them to life. Thanks for watching.